Welcome to my show. Thank you very much for being with us. It's my pleasure to welcome Vortex, Jeffrey Jones. And this is the first time that we can greet you on a Hungarian program. And my name is Peter Kalos. That's the only channel in the crypto sphere where there is a program without any name. My program doesn't have any name, it's just me. The first question that I have is that, as an icebreaker, that what is the longest time that you didn't bother checking the Bitcoin price?
Boy, first of all, Peter, that's a great question. Thank you so much for having me on this show. I'm just absolutely honored to be on your show and to greet, your audience. This is what it's all about, at the World Crypto Network and with Bitcoin and crypto, right? Is the world part, the World Crypto Network, trying to get in touch with our fans, trying to bring information and spread information about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to as many people, to as many countries as possible. And so, I just absolutely have to thank you so much for what you're doing, for bringing, this type of information to your local audience, to people of your country. I'm really, really, really happy and proud to be here. So, and I just want to thank you, Peter, so much for what you do.
So are we.
Yes, sir. So with that said, again, Peter, thank you for having me on the show. Let's talk about the first question you had. How long has it been since I've ever actually been, how long has it been the longest time period since I've actually watched the price? Well, let's see. To be honest, that's a tough one. It's probably going to be only a few hours, really. I mean, only a few hours to a couple of days, because you go on vacation too for a couple of days and things like that. So it's probably a couple of days.
Well, my personal record is 24 hours, I would say. But
awesome. And remember, it's not, it's not that price is important or anything like that. It's just that it's always there. It's 24/7. It kind of helps us guide how people are feeling in the community, what kind of things are going on and stuff like that. So we do pay attention to those things because, for example, if the price suddenly dropped, well, then we want to go look in the news to find out what happened, or if the price suddenly went up the other way, we want to find out what happened, So it's all about just kind of staying in touch with, staying on the latest bleeding edge, right? And staying in touch with what's going on and kind of being plugged in.
And Vortex, my Hungarian viewers don't know you. And therefore, I'd like you to introduce yourself. What do they have to know about you? Are you a Bitcoin maximalist? Personally, I know that you are an anchor in the World Crypto Network. So can you please summarize your background to my viewers, what they should know about you?
Sure. So, of course, I go by the pseudonym Vortex, right? I've been in the space now for a couple of years. Basically, I got in around 2012, started investing in 2013, started commentating around 2014, started my show in 2015. And since then, I've just kind of been on Twitter and doing my show there on the World Crypto Network. We call the Bitcoin News Show. I came to do that show in 2015 because I felt that there wasn't enough media out there. There wasn't enough podcasts. There was only a mainstream media coverage of crypto, and it was really, really terrible. So I really felt a need to kind of step up to create this podcast so that the community can be properly informed. And I really just was not happy with the mainstream media coverage. So at the time, there was just nobody putting out information and content like there is today. There's just a million great podcasters out there today. And we thank them for all that they do, and you yourself included. But back in 2015, this was when the bear market was happening. So this had been after the price had risen up to $1,200 and then subsequently fallen down. And so everybody kind of left for a while there, felt like it was pretty lonely. So I wanted to start my show. And, at the World Crypto Network, they've been actually doing shows for years and years. I think since 2013 or 2014. So I only joined in late 2015. So I'm kind of new there, but I guess in crypto years, that's kind of a long time now, been a couple of years. So, and since then, I've just been continuing to help the World Crypto Network with my show, continuing to bring more shows onto the World Crypto Network, and again, informing people about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And we have an audio podcast as well that people can subscribe to. We're not just on YouTube. You can find us on iTunes under the World Crypto Network, where we actually have a bunch of different shows in addition to just the content that we ourselves put out. We have, Adam Meister on there. We have Andy Hoffman on there. We're going to have a bunch of other people on there in the future as well. Even Trace Mayer's podcast. I hope to have that come to be syndicated across our network as well. So just a great place for information, and we welcome the community and their feedback.
I wish we would welcome Trace Mayer in our show one day. And I also wish you spoke Hungarian so you could regularly inform the Hungarian community.
We leave it up to soldiers like yourself, Peter.
I'll do the job and provide the subtitles. By the way, this will be, of course, in English. It will be on the YouTube. And then I will provide the Hungarian subtitles to the best of my abilities. So
I'll try to talk as slow as I can, Peter, but I'm kind of known for speaking pretty fast. It's a little bit difficult.
That's fine. Speak slowly, and I will try to type very, very quickly when I do the subtitles.
No problem.
The first thing that I'd like to talk about that Bitfinex introduced SegWit this week. Also, Coinbase announced that they would implement SegWit sometime the middle of next week. Despite the good news, the Bitcoin price has been falling for a couple of days. What is a possible explanation for this fall? Could you provide some insight of how do you see this Bitcoin fall and what are the possible explanations, please?
So, the Bitcoin price, of course, oscillates up and down. It is a volatile asset, right? As is all the cryptocurrencies because of their nascency, because they are so new. So we're going to expect this type of volatility for a couple more years to come. For example, when you compare all of cryptocurrency, the entire market cap is $500 billion or so. But when that's nothing in the grand scheme of things when you compare it to something like the dollar, right? With really or gold with many trillions of dollars behind it in liquidity. So it does get sloshed around a lot. But what's important to recognize, if you look back at the charts, you will see that time over time, year over year, Bitcoin does actually tend to go up. So it does, we have these corrections, right? It does go up and down. But what Bitcoin tends to do is it tends to go up and down in an upward direction. And so for example, last year in 2017, we had about 4, 5, possibly 6 corrections that were all, over 30%. So what happens is Bitcoin, we go up, thousands of percent, and then we drop about, 80, 90%. Then we go up thousands of percent, and then we drop 80, 90%. But in even smaller fragments than that, we go up, for example, several hundreds of percent, and then we drop 30%. Then we go up several hundreds of percent, and we drop 30 to 40%. This was a larger drop, over 50%. So that was a bit of a larger drop, did scare people and things like that. But again, if you look at the trend, everything is still pointing up. Now, we were expecting a price correction around $7,500 or so. Most analysts were expecting a price correction there because of the huge run up that we had already had. We've been expecting a price correction probably since around 5,000, but then when it went up a little bit more, we were like, okay, 7,500. That should be a good price correction. But what happened is that the whole world kind of piled in on the price, and it just shot it straight up to 20 grand within a matter of days or so, just maybe a couple of weeks. It was really, really fast. It was only at $20,000 for a couple of days. And so simply what happened was we exhausted the buyers, right? There was just no more buyers. So that means that people had to sell. So people sold. And again, we expected this correction all the way back from 7,500. So, this was or all the way back from 5,000. So this was a correction that was going to happen no matter what. And so when the price corrected, because there were so many new people that piled in, there was also so many people that kind of piled out, which of course accelerated the selling. But then we found our bottom, at around 7,000, and then we've since bounced in a perfectly good V pattern all the way up to 11,600. And now we're about to fall back down to the next Fibonacci line at around 9,200 before we can then correct back up past 15,000. So this is just standard market moves, standard oscillations, standard buyers and sells, standard psychology for markets. And we expect this to continue, this type of volatility to continue. But it is important to note that the volatility over time, which you can look up in Google, you can see that it has been decreasing over time. So as this asset gains more liquidity, it will begin to have its volatility decreased over time more and more until it's something more stable like the dollar or gold.
Right. I think that the SegWit adoption is really, really great news. It's actually huge news. We expected the introduction of SegWit at Coinbase maybe later this year. They told us they would do this year, but I didn't expect it in February. Maybe it will be in early March. So I expected a bounce or sudden, I would say, burst into the moon just because Coinbase took the initiative and they implemented or they are about to implement SegWit.
Yeah, so real quick, sorry to interrupt, but it's important to understand that people like to attach narratives, right, to these different price movements. And so people always want a simple reason why, right? So they can put it on an article, so they can put it in a podcast, so they can put it on the news program. But in all reality, there's a million reasons that all compound, right, to actually move the price. And it's never ever any one single thing. But most often it always is having to do with traders, right? With the speculators, because Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are so speculative right now, most of the volume is controlled by these speculators, by these market makers. And so we see all of the prices fall and rise to Fibonacci lines, to perfectly Fibonacci lines. Again, this fell to 7,000 or so, which is right about the bottom of the last high. And so then now we can go, they made a perfect V pattern up, because we are still in a big, large pattern. We made a perfect V pattern up to 11,600, and then now we're going to come down to 9,200. So it's not any specific narrative. For example, Coinbase activating, things like that. People will attach those type of narratives to price corrections constantly. They always have, and they always will, because again, people need reasons so they can sleep at night, right? The complexity is very, very, very overwhelming. And so it's very simple to attach these simple narratives to these complex markets.
Before moving on, let me ask another question, because this week we just learned that Venezuela would introduce Petro, and even though the Congress or the parliament voted against it, Maduro managed to go with his plan. And as we know, it seems Venezuela has its own cryptocurrency, the first country in the world that created an ICO. I don't know of any other currencies. I know that there would be crypto ruble and so on, but actually Venezuela is the first country that issued an ICO or created an ICO. Do you think it's a good development for the crypto community, or rather a country with questionable human rights record is just making use of the cryptocurrencies without making any substantial changes to the average average Venezuelan citizens?
Well, Peter, it's often important to understand a pretty good quote by Milt Friedman. Usually government fixes are often worse than the problems that they're trying to fix, right? So usually government fixes are worse than government problems. And so what we find is that this is going to be another case of that, where we definitely love this experimentation that's happening around the world, right? I like to say it's really a global financial renaissance that's happening across the world right now. Everybody is learning more and more about money, about how it works, how it's created, how we use it. And this is just another item in that long line of experimentation that we're about to embark on. And so I think that this is going to be good for crypto overall, because again, it's more experimentation, so we can figure out what works and what doesn't work. But right now we're kind of doing a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks approach, right? That's kind of what the world is doing right now, is experimenting with. And this is another example of that. So they did create this ICO, which was pretty unprecedented, as you say. They raised over $700 million, I think, in just a couple of days. So this is really, not only is it unprecedented for a country, but it's actually one of the largest and fastest selling ICOs that has ever been existed so far as I'm aware. And so, there's a lot of excitement that has been generated around this, again, this is the first country to do it, right? So there's a lot of people, because this is the first, there's also a lot of risk. There's also a lot of people wondering if this is going to work. Do I think this is going to work? Nobody actually knows. But what we can say is that the government in the past has not done a very good job with money, right? They have record inflation rates. It's getting out of control. The government has not been very friendly to cryptocurrency people and Bitcoin people. For example, they've been extorting miners. They've been stealing mining equipment and having the people install their own stolen mining equipment in the government buildings. There is a bunch of Bitcoin miners in the government embassies and buildings. And so, we've seen cryptocurrency begin to take off in that country, and that is definitely a good thing. But as far as the government running it, we know what governments do, right? States the state tries to take power, and so that's what it was trying to do here. Is it going to actually work is it going to actually work out for the whole country? Nobody actually knows at this point. We just have to watch it play out. But all we can do is continue to find out, what happens, asking people on the ground, seeing what's going on. I highly recommend, for example, Adam Meister. His Bitcoin channel. He just did a show recently on the World Crypto Network called the Adam Meister International News Show, where they had a great discussion with people on the ground in Venezuela, and you can definitely, definitely recommend checking that out if you guys want information, right up to date on the ground. That was just recorded a couple days ago, so you guys can check that out. But as far as seeing if this is going to work, nobody really knows. We have to watch it play out. But what I want to stress as important is that it's still Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is still the main thing you want to have. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are still the thing you want to be around, the thing you want to have saved, the thing you want to know about. This is what is going to drive finance, for the perceivable future. So I guess I would say that please, still, everybody do their own research, and we hope it works out, but don't stop buying Bitcoin.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will let you know when we have a national Hungarian ICO, which will definitely not happen until early April, because we'll have a national election. Maybe the new government will issue one. That was just a joke, because they won't do that, of course. So let's move on. And my first question to you and my Hungarian viewers would really like to know more about the roadmap of Bitcoin, because some of my viewers feel that the Bitcoin team are very slow. They let us down because the transaction fees are slow or were slow, and they had to pay a lot of mining fee, and just nothing is moving on. Everything is so slow. So what would be your answer to them, and what will be the tangible improvements for the average users, Bitcoin users, this year?
Sure. So a couple, it's a pretty big question. So there's a couple things. Let's start out with the fact that Bitcoin fees have been going down as of recent. I'm sure your users have, and your viewers have experienced this just recently. We've had a sharp decline in the actual fee of what the actual Bitcoin Satoshis per bytes are. So that has been a very sharp decline as of recent. We believe, there's a lot of people that believe, and there's a lot of work that has been done, a lot of experimentation that has been put out there in people's blogs and things like that, about how we pretty much believe that these transaction fees have mostly been caused by spam, because the actual usage hasn't gone up incredibly high, because most of the Bitcoin usage is still on centralized exchanges, people using Bitcoin debit cards, these type of situations. The vast majority of Bitcoin transactions happen off chain currently right now, and so there was no need, there was no economic real reason why the fees were so high, except for this spam that was ongoing for at least the better part of a year. We saw this many millions of transactions come online that were very, very, very small, and that had no apparent use. This was no organic use. There was no organic use at all. So with this spam, transaction fees began to rise and rise and rise. It's not just from usage. It's important to understand that the actual transactions, for example, that we have right now are the same that we had way back in July of last year. So some transactions have dropped down, of course, but it's the same usage as it was July of last year, yet the transaction fees have sharply declined in only a month. And so what this tells us is that it's not usage that's driving up these fees. It's really not. It was these bad actors in the ecosystem spamming the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, in addition to that, there has been an insane amount of stuff that has been in development to combat that, right? So with SegWit, as you mentioned, that's a big one, right? That's a huge one that allows us to be able to have much more block space. It allows us to have much smaller transactions. So that's really, really important. It's a double-edged, it's really a kind of a 1-2 prong, because there's a lot of features within SegWit, including the ability to add versioning now. So now we can actually soft fork in anything that we want, any new features, which I'll talk about in a minute. These new features, anything we can think of, we can just soft fork in now. We don't actually need to do very many hard forks at all. So now that we have, so SegWit was a big thing, but then we found that something is even bigger than that, Peter, which was transaction batching. We found that big companies like Coinbase and Bitstamp and others weren't batching their transactions properly. And so that was actually causing a bunch of unnecessary transactions on the blockchain and a bunch of bloat. And so now we've seen companies like Bitstamp, like Coinbase, and other companies come forward and say, hey, oh, look, we've implemented batching and SegWit. And so this is great. So those are two great big things. So those are the main things that are going to help in the short term of taking down these transaction fees. But then in addition to that, before I go on to the features, I want to mention that protocol development is very, very difficult. what people are working on here on the Bitcoin protocol, this is not an application. This is not an iPhone app. This is not a web app. Okay. This is not a social network. This is a protocol. Protocol development is very, very specialized, highly specialized field. Very, very few developers in the field are actually out there creating protocols, because again, these protocols are so difficult of what they're trying to do, which is moving bits of data at scale across the planet. So these protocols, for example, SMTP for your mail, right? HTTP for routing domains, and for browsing the web, www, right? For browsing the web. The World Wide Web sits on top of the TCP/IP protocol. And so there's these layers of protocols that had to have been built. We didn't just say, hey, guess what? We're going to build the internet and it's going to scale to 4K video right now today. No, what happened, right? We over time, over years, in fact, decades, scaled the internet to where it was now. In fact, there was a time where we didn't have images. Then we got images, and then there was music, and then there was videos, and then there was HD videos, and now there's 4K videos, right? And now there's VR, and it's going to continue evolving. So same goes for the Bitcoin protocol. Because it's such a huge process, it's such a huge development, many hundreds of people contribute to this protocol. And in this decentralized open source manner, things take time, much more time than, for example, a centralized company like Ripple that says, hey, we're going to build the database, we're going to have this many transactions, and we're going to control everything. That's pretty easy to do. We can do that already. That's not interesting, right? Things like Bitcoin Cash is not interesting, just raising the block size. That's not interesting. That's not scale. That's not real scale. And indeed, Microsoft has come forward with research to say that on-chain scaling is not a viable way to keep decentralization happening. It's not. It will destroy it. So with all this research and all these things, we can come to find out that protocol development is very difficult and takes time. And people are impatient, and that's fine. But look, the only people that can help it are you. If you know somebody, or if you are a developer, please go check out the code. It's open source. This is, we welcome the best of the best. This is the best. Bitcoin has the best developers, the biggest ecosystem. So all the people, Bitcoin is the Mount Everest of protocol development. So it attracts all the very best of the best developers. And even the best of the best developers take time. This takes time. So what happens in FOSS, free open source development, is that people, the stuff that gets worked on first are what people are passionate about. Since there's no central CEO, right, to say, you got to work on this and it's got to be done by this time. It's just people in their spare time, volunteering their time to work on what they believe is the most important. And so, so we have a bunch of new features coming out now that's being worked on. So let me just quickly go into those. So another big feature that's coming up is something called Snore Signatures. And what this allows us to do is this allows us to aggregate signatures in a block. So what that means is that, for example, for multisig, it's very expensive to do, like, for example, 1,000 different multisig, right? But if we use Snore Signatures, we can do 10,000 signatures in one signature for the price of one signature. We aggregate all of these thousands of signatures into one single signature. And now we can have so that does a couple of things, right? That gives us more space on the blockchain, which reduces fees, and that gives us more optimization, which reduces the transaction size. And so this really is a big thing in helping us scale, both helping us and scale everywhere, right? Helping us scale in transaction size and helping us scale in block size. So that's absolutely fantastic. Then another thing that's coming down the line is something called MAST, right? Which is these Merkleized abstract syntax trees, right? Which is a big mouthful for basically just saying that it's basically like smart contracts. This allows us to do very complex, very, very scalable smart contracts on Bitcoin. And it's really, really a big thing to say that it's scalable, because that's what's important. You see, the smart contract platform of choice right now, for example, Ethereum, is having its scaling issues of its own, right? It's costing multiple dollars for a transaction now. Their blockchain size is almost 3 times the size of Bitcoin, and they've been around for only a couple of years, right? Since 2014 or so. So they're scaling. It's very untenable. It gets to be untenable. And so what we're seeing is that these features that are coming out for Bitcoin are designed from the beginning to be trustless and scalable. These two things are what takes time. Anybody can throw it together, a centralized platform and increase the amount of transactions per second and things like that. But with Bitcoin, we make sure that it's trustless. We make sure that it's decentralized, and this takes time. And there are many more features that are in the pipeline. For example, Lightning, right? I mean, Lightning is going to take off. It's going to make Bitcoin be the most, Bitcoin be the most used medium of exchange across the planet by far, or many orders of magnitude. Every other coin that is not using Lightning will not be able to participate in this new Lightning layer. This Lightning layer is basically HTTP for Bitcoin. This is amazing. Remember, this took 2 years, like 2 or 3 years to build, but this is such an amazing accomplishment to build a routing and platform, over the top of Bitcoin. And this Lightning network is instant and it's encrypted by default. So it's super private, right? And this is at scale, at Bitcoin scale. And so this is really amazing stuff that's coming down the pipeline. Those are just a few features, but there's just so much more. This is my full-time job, and I can barely keep up.
I see. Do you know whether Mast and Snore Signature will be available in the summer or after summer? Do you know at least the month or quarter?
So again, with the model that Bitcoin operates, the free open source software model, there are no hard dates, for example, because most of this work is volunteer work. Right. So most of this work is going to be growing organically based on the community, what the community wants. This is really a truly open source project where anybody can participate. And when you have those type of conditions, what you have is that you find that, dates aren't predictable. Things are spontaneous. For example, the user activated software, right? No dictator said, create this. That was just created organically. Somebody out of the blue came up with that. And then, for example, confidential transaction bulletproofs. Somebody just kind of dropped this information, dead dropped it in an IRC chat, and then disappeared, right? Like, so we have, with this model, there's pluses and minuses. Some of the pluses are that, we have this spontaneous development that just creates amazing technologies that just launches the whole planet forward a few years. And then there's some drawbacks, for example, where we can't really have exact hard dates on when certain things are implemented. Because again, this is organic, this is global, this is truly decentralized. This is what proves Bitcoin is decentralized, because we can't give you hard dates. So, but as far as you want to know, for example, so this year, Lightning is just for a quick roadmap. This year, Lightning and medium exchange is very, very important. That's what everybody's working on, right? The next year, we're going to be working on a lot more privacy stuff, so confidential transactions and stuff. But Mast and Snore really are the next things to come in line, and they could be here as early as next year.
Okay, so we discussed then this year, what happens this year. So what are the plans for 2019, 2020? What are the major developments that will enrich the user experience of Bitcoin in 2019 and 2020?
Yeah, so it is going to be Snore and Mast, because again, these take years. And Lightning, these take years of development. So Lightning through that time will be continuing to grow. I expect Lightning to just kind of take over going into 2019. And then, Snore, well, I hope to have some kind of software or some kind of activation with that, by, again, 2019, 2020. So the only things that are really happening this year mainly is Lightning. Like, that's the big thing this year is Lightning. That's what's just going to change the game completely, and kind of make, the Bitcoin domination index just completely irrelevant, because Bitcoin is already dominant. It is the dominant. It's the it's the unit of account for all of crypto. It's the store of value, the backup for all of crypto. All of the prices in crypto follow Bitcoin price, right? So it will also become the medium of exchange with Lightning.
But then I recall that users have to be on SegWit. So as long as they are on the legacy chain, they can't enjoy the benefits of the Lightning network. Am I right?
No, that's incorrect. So Lightning is actually still compatible without SegWit. You don't actually need SegWit to do it. However, without SegWit, it becomes far less secure and far less trustworthy. And so it's not recommended. So for example, Lightning could work on Bitcoin Cash. It doesn't have SegWit, but it could still work. However, it will work in a much less secure, less optimized way, in a way so less secure and optimized that most developers won't even attempt it. They won't even attempt to put the Lightning Network on Bitcoin Cash. They won't even attempt to put the Lightning Network on coins without SegWit, because SegWit is the key glue, right? The key feature that allows Lightning to be enabled securely.
Right, because I recommended my viewers to transition into the SegWit chain as long as the transaction costs are so low. So
yes, this is the best time. the best time.
Yeah, exactly, because now the Bitcoin transactions are just so cheap. Actually, they started to be cheap a few weeks ago. So I recommended all my viewers, my friends, to move over to the SegWit chain and leave behind the legacy chain, because it is legacy, as the name says. I don't think it is a good idea to stay in the legacy chain. Of course, if the exchange only lets them transfer their money to the legacy chain, that there is no choice, but they can also transfer first and then they move over to the SegWit chain.
And see, that's what's beautiful, right? Is that it's completely opt-in, right? It's completely optional. You can choose to use it or not. It'll still be backwards compatible. 10 years from now, there can still be some Bitcoin addresses without SegWit that are on the legacy chain that can just send their coin if they want to SegWit to upgrade, right? That's the beautiful point of backwards compatibility. That's one of the main tenets of Bitcoin Core, and the Bitcoin Core process is that to keep backwards compatibility. The biggest tenets really are, decentralization and censorship resistance, and then the next one is backwards compatibility. You have to have that, and with a hard fork, you completely lose that.
Right. Thank you very much, Vortex. So let's move to the next questions. We talked about Bitcoin quite a lot. What are your favorite altcoins, if there are any, and what functionalities and features do you like in these altcoins?
So, again, I really enjoy all of the experimentation that's going on out there. There's just so much. I love it. As far as picking individual altcoins, though, the problem is that out of all of this innovation and all this stuff going on out there, there's, for all of that amazing work that's being done, solid work that's being done, there's two scams, right? So for every good thing that's being worked on, there's like 5 or 6 scams in comparison. And so unfortunately, right now, there just really is like 99% of scams out there. 99% of the market caps, of the cryptos, of the ICOs are pretty much, scams, or not going to work, or just duplicating other features. They're just going to die over time. And so there's only a few out there that are really experimenting, interesting things, but you can usually find them in the top 100, and they'll, anything really worth exploring into the future will usually stay in the top 100 for a while. So I don't actually want to name any specific coins, because there's just so many, and it really is difficult, because when you name a coin, then that coin could pump, and then that coin can people can point back and say, oh, you endorsed that coin, and it's not about endorsement here, right? This is about experimentation. This is about replacing the old traditional financial system, right? This is not a war between crypto. This is a war between crypto and fiat. That's what's really important for your viewers, I think, to remember and to take away, is that with all this amazing experimentation, we're not fighting amongst each other. We're not competing with each other. We are competing with the legacy financial system. And that is what is important to take away. So just so and again, there's a bunch of coins out there. They're all doing great things. I really encourage your audience to do their own research and things like that. But of course, only invest, the majority of some of your money would in Bitcoin, because that is, of course, that has the most security, the longest chain, the most trust, the biggest ecosystem, the best developers.
I can already envisage my viewers saying, "Oh, Vortex, please say no. Please say no." Okay, I understand that.
You bet. There's a bunch of people out there that, Vortex, what do you think of Neo? Vortex, what do you think of Litecoin? What do you think of this? And what do you think of that? And all these, I'm like, look, they're all great. There's lots of experimentation out there. Do your own research. 99% of it's going to be scams, but do your own research. And that's what's great. But I can tell you that the brunt of the work, right? The big majority of this experimentation is being done on Bitcoin, simply because that is the most interesting, because that has the most history, the biggest impact, the most liquidity. This is what attracts the biggest problems. This is what attracts developers to it.
I can see that the Bitcoin dominance has been climbing steadily. It's almost at 40% as we speak. Do you think that this dominance will go up, or do you think it will come down and there may be a flippening, which means that Ethereum might dethrone Bitcoin, or Bitcoin Cash can dethrone Bitcoin? Do you foresee that any of these alts will take over and be on top of the coin market cap?
So it's really interesting, because the Bitcoin dominance indicator was a pretty great utility for a while there, because anybody can we can see how many coins there are versus with Bitcoin, right? So it was a good indicator, because those coins could not be created out of thin air, right? They were all mineable. There was no way to just create coins out of thin air. But nowadays, the top 10 coins are mostly proof of stake coins, right? They're mostly coins that actually require no energy to create. And so what that means is that in a world where you can print hundreds and hundreds of billions of tokens out of thin air and say they have value, the Bitcoin domination index doesn't make any sense anymore. It's actually 100% irrelevant at this point, because Bitcoin, it takes real energy, thermodynamic. It costs money to create that coin. It costs thousands of dollars to create a Bitcoin. And we can prove this. We can prove the thermodynamics of it with mathematics and cryptography to say that this coin was mined at this time, from this block. We can see, okay, how much electricity it was needed to create that block. And so, in a world where there's just these crazy coins like Ripple and Cardano that can just create these hundreds and hundreds of billions of tokens. Somebody can buy one single token for $1, and now all of a sudden they have billion-dollar market caps. So in a world where you can create Peter coin, right? You can create 1 billion Peter coin, sell one of those to me for $1, and now what do you got? You got $1 billion market cap, Peter. No problem.
Yeah. I will still keep making this show, but maybe from Mallorca, but I promise you I'll be in front of the camera.
Exactly. And so, in this type of world that we have right now, the DOM index doesn't make a whole lot of sense anymore. And so it's just important, I think, for your viewers to understand that, Bitcoin, it takes real effort and real energy to create a coin through this proof of work mechanism that we call mining, which is, again, the most secure way of creating money that we've ever come up with on the planet, the most secure and fair way of creating money that we've ever had on this earth. When you compare that throw that in the same bunch of Cardano and Ripple, who just print billions of tokens and put them on a database instead of a blockchain, it just doesn't make any sense. Real quick, just one more example. It's like, for example, let's say we have Amazon, right? We have Amazon.com. If I go and create another, Amazon.com clone, right? That if they were cryptocurrencies, all of a sudden, Amazon's market dominance would shrink. Right? Even though I have 0 viewers on my website, just the fact that it's in existence now brings down Amazon's domination index, right? It makes no sense, because I don't have the cloud computing backup thing like Amazon has, right? So why lump me into the same group as Amazon, right? Makes no sense.
Many experts say that coin market cap or the total market cap is a very false indicator of the reality, but unfortunately, this is what we have at hand. So thank you very much for your time. And in closing, to my Hungarian viewers, how can they reach you? How can they contact you? How can they follow you?
Sure. So thank you again, Peter, so much, man. It's been a great time. I hope we stayed within your times there. I tend to go on there for a while once we start talking about Bitcoin, man. I really love it. I really appreciate the time. Really appreciate you having me on here. You guys can find all my work, of course, on the World Crypto Network there, the WCN. You can just Google World Crypto Network or YouTube. Again, we have our audio feed on iTunes as well. And then you can find all my work on my Twitter account, mostly at the One Vortex, all spelled out at the One Vortex, and then theonevortex.com.
I will put it in the video description so my users can find it. Thank you very much once again, and to my Hungarian viewers, see you in my next show. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thanks, Peter.